Happy New Year! Let's kick off 2026 with a Batman story. If you're asking why, well, you must be new around these parts. Well, let's just say that I kind of have a tradition of doing a Batman story as my first video of a new year. As for the story selected, I have a couple of rules in place on what counts. Number 1, the story has to be focused on Batman. While other characters like members of the Bat family or other superheroes may show up, Batman is the main character of the story. This rules out comics like Batgirl Year One or Grayson. Number 2, the story has to be part of mainstream continuity, or at the very least, should have been intended as part of mainstream continuity. If its canonicity changed because of a reboot or a retcon, that's fine. But this rules out stuff like DKR or Absolute Batman. Now that we've cleared that up, let's get to this year's selection. The Misfits, Shadow of the Bat issues 7 to 9. Written by the late Alan Grant and art by the late Tim Sale, The Misfits is a story about Batman's lesser-known rogues, the ones who are considered jokes or has-beens compared to the Joker, Two-Face, or Scarecrow, and how they, somehow, nearly got Batman. The story opens with Batman dealing with a new villain calling himself the Chancer. Now, before you laugh at his dumb name and equally dumb costume that looks like he mugged Vindicator from Alpha Flight, it is worth noting that he seems to have some sort of luck-based power, hence the chance and Chancer. Additionally, even when Batman nearly brings him down, a distraction by another new character leads to Chancer seemingly leaping to his death. This new character goes by Nimrod the Hunter. And yes, I can just as easily draw a connection to the X-Men villain, and as much as I like drawing X-Men connections in this video focused on Batman, I just have to say I cannot take anyone calling themselves Nimrod seriously, having grown up watching Looney Tunes. Anyway, it turns out Chancer's luck has held as he has been saved by the lesser-known villain Catman. However, Catman wants Chancer to repay the favor, with a very persuasive bit of reasoning courtesy of his pet panther Sasha. Luckily, once Chancer shows that he was good as his word, Catman offers to bring him in on a bigger plan, along with some other guys. One of those guys is the Calendar Man, who, just like Catman, plants a device at a specific location. And it's not long until we meet the final member of our Misfits, Killer Moth. He goes on a monologue/tirade on why he chose Calendar Man and Catman. They're all second-class supervillains, i.e. Misfits. So, he's brought them together to pull off a caper that will push them into the spotlight. Look, these guys put on bright costumes and commit flashy crimes. It should not be a surprise that they have attention-seeking tendencies. The caper in question is a ransom of 3 of the biggest people in Gotham: Mayor Kroll, Commissioner Gordon, and Bruce Wayne. And they do, almost without any issue. Killer Moth and Chancer kidnap Bruce as he's about to enter Wayne Foundation, while Calendar Man and Catman capture Kroll and Gordon with ease. Once captured, Gordon tries to help Kroll and Wayne escape, but they don't get far thanks to Sasha. Their demand is for $10 million in 5 hours or else. Except, unbeknownst to his co-conspirators, Killer Moth does not intend on returning his kidnapped victims back alive. Meanwhile, Nimrod becomes relevant to the story again as he claims to have information on Chancer. Robin, Tim Drake at the time, tries to arrest him but is forced to accept his help. Nimrod points out that the Misfits have most likely taken their victims to the docks as the time frame that they provided lines up to when the tide comes in. which is a bit of a stretch, but Nimrod has to make himself useful, I guess. However, Sergeant Essen, currently James Gordon's wife, is asked to deliver the ransom and shoots down their plan. Robin decides to check out the docks while he asks, or coerces, there's a lot of that going on in this story, Nimrod to tail Essen and make sure she's safe. Tim uses Ace, who in the post-crisis era is a Mastiff instead of a German Shepherd, and a former guide dog to a blind Native American named Black Wolf, ooh, that's a long story, to locate the hideout of the Misfits, who have gone to collect the ransom money from Essen. Meanwhile, as Tim tangos with Sasha, Bruce was able to free the others in time before they ended up buried at sea. Nimrod takes on all four of the Misfits but is taken down. Luckily, Batman finally shows up and kicks their asses, while Nimrod at least has the satisfaction of bringing down Chancellor before willingly surrendering. Labeling someone as a misfit, or what they intend here, D-lister, can be rather interesting, namely because this label is rarely something that comes from in-universe characterization, but from external response by readers on how the character's portrayal felt to them. Additionally, this is not set in stone, as public perception can change. Take Mr. Freeze, who started off as the underwhelming Mr. Zero, but eventually became a staple of Batman's Rogues Gallery courtesy of the animated series episode Heart of Ice. So, this story seems to focus on three such D-listers, Catman, Calendar Man, and Killer Moth, and showcase that even these misfits can be a threat if given enough focus. Except, the story also undercuts this by having this story also utilize new characters, Chancellor and Nimrod, and the focus on their relationship as well. Sadly, having read this in the far future from when this was published, with the knowledge that neither Chancellor nor Nimrod made an appearance outside of this story, painfully highlights how much of a drag their mere existence is. Because when the story focuses on our trio of misfits, it's pretty decent. We see them pull off their plan without a hitch, and yes, while Chancellor was part of the team too, you could cut him out and not much would change. Sure, Nimrod figured out where they were at the docks, but Tim could have done that with a few rewriting passes. Ugh. What's worse is that this story is the post-crisis debut of all of these established villains. This is especially notable for Killer Moth, who still has his pre-crisis history where he found out Bruce Wayne was Batman before it got retconned away a few years later. Although I doubt this would have made a huge change to the status quo of these villains, and they would most likely end up not being used after this story had ended. Well, all three of the established misfits do get a few notable attempts to make them cool to varying degrees of success. Killer Moth, who in this story was the tryhard of the bunch, had the worst attempt. In the event Underworld Unleashed, which goes even further to establish how much of a loser Killer Moth is, he gets turned into a bug monster called Charaxus. This does not make him very popular and instead leads to him getting killed off a decade later in Infinite Crisis after seeing almost no use throughout the entirety of it. Post New 52, he's back to being a human and just as pathetic. Calendar Man mostly remains a joke, but he does get a Hannibal Lecter moment in The Long Halloween as the established criminal with a holiday-themed gimmick. Still, personally speaking, I think he actually does very little in this story and is just kind of there, but I do believe my opinion is in the minority here. Finally, we have Catman, who actually ended up having something of a redemption. After a minor appearance in Green Arrow showcasing that he had devolved into an even bigger loser, Writer Gail Simone was able to turn the character around as part of her Secret Six series, highlighting his sympathetic traits and giving the character some much needed depth. It has been some time since the character has been prominently used. He has basically become a staple Secret Six character, and whenever they show up, he's like, well, gotta have Catman on the Secret Six. But he's no longer a D-list supervillain. He's a fan favorite niche character, which is the cooler version of the Misfit. So, this is something new I'm trying out this year where I take a look at the setting of a story and note how certain characters, concepts, and even ideas have permitted into the story based on when it was taking place. Not going to do it for everything I cover, but wherever it might be relevant. The Misfits is an early 90s comic, which is something worth noting as the 90s are known to be a period where villains became darker and even heroes adopted more violent means. We see that with Chancer, a villain who has no issues killing, and Nimrod, who is an anti-hero, though not an extremely dark one. But we also see this with the established Misfits, as Catman and Calendar Man make it very clear they are only in this for the money and the infamy, and actually draw the line at killing. On one hand, this shows that they are noble, but on the other hand, this might also showcase that they are outdated relics. After all, if villains don't choose to kill nowadays, how can anybody be expected to take them seriously? Let me remind you, the aforementioned Underworld Unleashed, only a few years after this, was published with the intent of fixing these outdated villains. Almost none were. We also see Killer Moth trying to be darker and failing. I'm not sure if he was failing to be edgy or just had no idea of how to be edgy. As for the setting, besides Tim as Robin, we also have Sergeant Sarah Essen, who was happily married to Jim at the time. This is also the very brief period where there was an actual canon version of Ace the Bat Hound, though they never actually call him the Bat Hound in this, before he gets written out of the books during Nightfall. Not much else to note here, except while there are other Bat adjacent characters like Nightwing, Oracle, and Huntress at this time, they are more solo acts and aren't really a Bat family, so to speak. And that's The Misfits, a story about perceived lame villains trying not to be perceived as such. Sadly, if only they knew that the perception came down to people writing top 10 lamest Batman villain listicles online, and whether or not they added them. Or I guess a YouTube short, because who reads these days, am I right? The state of the world depresses me.